here we are for the Q&A with the director Victor Checa. After seeing this wonderful movie, I do have a couple of questions, but since we do not have that much time, I'd like to ask you one question and then direct it to the audience. Um, Making science fiction in Latin America is not easy. What were the biggest struggles that you faced while doing this movie?
Um, we always thought the film not as science fiction film. So basically, because the idea was a father and son relationship and a machine. So when we start thinking about how the machine develops itself, the form of the machine and how then these genres appear, no? Like science fiction or cinema noir, but like we really never thought about how we're going to do a science fiction film. Like it's very subtle in that sense. So basically, it's a very minimalist film, so we didn't have much resources in terms of a conventional sci-fi film. Most of the sci-fi elements are from sound, so basically there was a lot of work in sound, which is very important for me. So I mean, it was not complicated in terms of a science fiction film. More complicated was to create like a sense of unity because Lima is a very different. It has different scenarios, and so how to build this sensation of loneliness and melancholy was complicated. But we worked mainly at night, so it was kind of maybe the most complicated was the main character was a 10-year-old kid. No? So in order to work in these hours, we had to really manage well time.
Yeah, and I do want to ask you about that. I'm going to steal you one more question. So about the actors, I was amazed by the chemistry from the kid and the father. Were these professional actors? How was the process of casting for the film?
I mean, the father is a professional actor, but the other kids no. So basically, what we did to make it short is because I think a film is like a character, so the other characters are like different forms of the personality of the main character. So I think more as a group and a dynamic than one character independent. So in that sense, we create the casting for a group and not for a particular person. No? So once we figure out what was the best combination in terms of characters, then we make them work. Because if you think it's a 10-year-old kid that has to manage almost 40 days of shooting, so he needs to be supported by his other actors, no? Or actresses or performers, however you want to call them. So we work long time in this, no? So to find a dynamic that could work, no? Especially because it has also a particular tone in terms of how language is used and the way they deliver the text. So we needed to really find this dynamic, no?
Do you have time to rehearse the movie?
I don't believe much in some kind of rehearsal, like we rehearse, but you cannot with kids rehearse so much because then they lose energy. So it was kind of a game, and but also the space of the apartments it was very complex in terms of how you move the camera in that space. And we don't use many things because we don't have. So basically, it was also like to think with the few resources we had how to move in the space and to prepare for the kid coming and not making him do like 10 shoots because we didn't have time and the kid loses energy as well. So we have to be very precise in that time. So.
Awesome. I would like to open it up to you. Any questions you might have? Yes.
I have a question. It's more a curiosity. Where do you find the main children actor?
Well, he's the son of an actor. I tried to make a film that I couldn't for a long time. And the main character was his father.
I know he's a Peruvian famous actor,
Yeah.
but the child is very talented, and I impressed how he performed in the movie. In is I noticed that he has a high quality of acting. So I wanted to know where do you find it?
I find it through his father, but also it's very complicated 10-year-old kid because actors 10-year-old they tend to have like a very stronic way of relating with the camera. No? So I wanted the opposite. So it happened that he was also like this, and I mean, I think he did an amazing job, no? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
and also because he had to work and hold on, and he hasn't acted before. He didn't perform before on a camera or anything, so it was kind of yeah, I mean, difficult in that sense. But he was a great kid, so and we also work for him, which is understanding what he can give and not trying to deliver so much. Because sometimes you try to deliver and then you lose time and you make the kid go crazy. So sometimes it's to understand. That's why it's so important in Peru, for example, that you have so many resources to use time in your behalf, which means you use time to know the kid, to hang out with him, and then you know how you can work with him. You know? That's I think is very important.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have a question. Are you planning to do maybe a second movie? And if yes, will you be willing to have a French actor?
Uh, I mean, yeah, I'm doing a next film. I'm not sure how am I going to do the casting, but yeah, I mean, I like to work in like small film like this, but also work with some genres and things. So next film is kind of it has a little bit of a lot of genres and things.
Yes.
You talked a little about the evolution of the machine. Like how did you get to make it? Did you take a part of it? You hire somebody to make it pieces of other machines?
How do I make it short? I mean, basically, what we did is first we needed like something concrete. So what we did is, okay, let's do an hypothesis of how would a machine to create rain would work. So we hire a mechanic and a guy specialized in weather, and we work with them to have an hypothesis, like a written paper. So once we understand how it works, we say, okay, how do we make this into a machine physically? So we use some principles from that hypothesis to create the space, and then we work with an architecture and who is also an art director together to understand how we can, what things we could do more fiction, uh, but also how can we make it in space, and then we create like a model of how it could be, and then we build it in an apartment, like with fibra de vidrio, which is a very, and then we cover it, and then we start working. So we work between a sculptor, this architecture, and me to understand how we can be displayed on the space. No, because we don't have any post production in the machine, only when you see the inside. So basically, we work physically with everything you see. It is there. So it's easy to connect with it, you know, but yeah, I mean, it's more, but also important that I think is not mentioned because we think usually as a physical thing, the machine, but it's also a sound. I think it's very important how it sounds, you know, because the way it sounds, it gives body to what you see. So it was not just about how it looks, but how it sounds. Well, what is the quality in sound of it, you know? So after understanding this, it was also better to understand how it will be displayed physically. You know?
Yes.
I understand that you shot on different countries and just made a co-production of several countries. Like, did you shoot different pieces, or was more like post-production or visual effects between 4 countries, right?
I mean, our main co-producer was Mexican, which is Berta and Navarro, and the idea originally was to shoot the machine in a studio in Mexico. But for me, it was very important to work with Peruvian crew, and for many reasons. Because I wanted to keep it like a small film, it's a very low budget film, so I wanted to work with Peruvian. So we shoot almost we shoot everything in Peru, and we work with post production, everything from Mexico and a little part from Spain. So the idea was to work the post production from even the script. So the few things we have from visual effects, we take the Mexican guide to Peru to see everything and to have like a 3D understanding of the space. And then we work at sound design in Ecuador, but the mix in Mexico, color, the mix, and the visual effects, everything was done in Mexico. And Germany and Spain enter more like in the distribution part, but they basically the main core was Latin America, no? Like Mexico, Peru, and Ecuador. And I think that's very important because I think for us, what we received from Mexico was very important at first at the beginning because we needed to finance and fight for a film that usually we don't do in Peru. So Berta was very important in that sense, and also to understand how to work post-production, I think it was very important. No? But mainly was shoot with Peruvian crew. I mean, 90%, 95% of the production crew is Peruvian. No?
And we have time for one more question. Yes.
I was just wondering, this was your father at the end, right? What kind of machine was your father making, and how much do you feel like you relate with the character?
I mean, it's first my father was making he read in a newspaper that there was this inventor doing like a multiplying energy machine, so he wanted to make that machine, and I find my father working on that machine. So I said, wow, this is a great idea, because he did it hidden. So I find out because my lights on my apartment was going off all the time, so that was happening, and then I find him working. And then, so I had this idea of the film, and then we go completely to fiction, to think in a rain machine or cloud-based machine. And then when I finished shooting, 1 month later, my father died. So then this opened like a new way of relating to the film that made the film change completely in terms of, because before this, the machine was like the hero in some way, But then I said, no, maybe it's not the hero, maybe it's the anti-hero. And then from this decision, the film changed completely the way it. So I think it has like a personal connection, but at the same time it's fiction, but it also, some things related to what happened, like change the way I approach or the tone of the film. So it's basically that.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you, Victor. And we have one more screening. If you want to keep talking with Victor in the lobby.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And the girl, they didn't like the child so much. They said she was a little chubby, so they didn't like.
No, so, we'll be here, so, and we're going, I think, for dinner or something.
Wine, are you happy?
Ya. Sí, sí. No, ¿dónde?